r/credit. What is a weird childhood memory you have that you don't know whether it's true or not? One time when I was about 8, we were at a relative's cabin and I went to go tell my dad it was lunchtime when I saw him standing stock still in the river. I called out to him and he just slowly motioned for me to be quiet. I watched him standing there, looking into the water for maybe a full minute before he lurched into the water and snatched up an enormous carp. I just watched my dad hold on to this giant, glistening carp for several seconds before he threw it back into the river and waded out of the river like nothing happened. He didn't say anything about it when we got back to the cabin and we've never talked about it. I could ask him about it now, I suppose, but there's something magical or surreal about the fact that it was never spoken of again. There was an old couple who lived on the other side of my backyard fence. They had grandkids who were a bit older than me or younger than me, so we weren't friends. When I was 3 or 4 years old I met a kid who was visiting them across the fence. He told me they were his grandparents and I would talk with him through the fence. It was awkward and we would mostly just sit there and play with our own toys in silence or just look at each other for hours. A lot like the two kids in The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas. His name was Brian, and every time I played with him his grandfather would give me a weird look. We moved cities shortly after, and years later I brought it up with my brothers and my mom and they don't remember the neighbors having a grandkid my age. They remember the older kids and the younger ones, but not anyone my age. They don't remember me ever playing with anyone out there. They don't remember anything about it at all. It still freaks me out to think about that. There was a thunderstorm one afternoon. I very vividly remember 2 lightning bolts traveling horizontally and colliding, forming this spherical cage of lightning in the sky. For just a moment, I can see it so clearly in my mind. The color of the sky, the room I was in, the way the air felt, the shapes the lightning took, but I haven't found any example of a similar phenomenon anywhere online, so if someone who knows more about lightning would chime in, that'd be great. Close bracket. Not sure how old I was exactly, but I know I was younger than 8. Edit. Holy crap. Wow. Thanks for responding everyone. Looks like lots of people have similar experiences. Ball lightning is coming up a lot. I'm still reading about it and looking for good images, but I'm kind of confused about it so far. Seems like a lot of people see will-o-the-wisp looking things, while what I saw was more like a wizard battle in the sky. What fun. I'll get back to you. Albus the crow was a bit of an outcast because of his weak wings and slightly crooked beak. Usually hungry and always alone, he one day spotted an easy meal, a brown mass of food held by a slightly ugly human child. Albus was desperate enough to give it a go. He swooped down and stole the nourishment belonging to another species young. He ate it a little ways away, not feeling guilty about it, because Albus was a crow and the human child looked fat and enough to survive without the excess calories. The sugar rush that Albus experienced from the cookie was immense. Albus let out a mighty cry and soared into the skies, cutting mightily through the air, even faster than his healthy fellow crows, who were greatly surprised to see him doing so well. Boldened by his newfound might, Albus soared down and spent a while teasing a cat, who was very confused and offended by his behavior. The other crows were very impressed. Now seeing Albus in a new light, they made him the leader of their community. Albus lived out the rest of his life in abundance and bliss, sometimes remembering the chubby, ugly child's stupid little face as it watched him steal its food. Albus would sometimes fly out and check on the little freak, having developed inexplicable fondness for them. He would sometimes let out his voice and try to warn the small dummy that they were about to fall down or run into something and hit their head, but they never seemed to notice. Oh well. Albus last visited you a few weeks ago. Birds age at a different rate than humans. When he arrived that time you were young and strong on your feet and maybe even a bit less ugly than before, but Albus' ice cold been playing tricks on him. Because Albus was now very old, a sack of rickety old bones under a patchy cloak of feathers that had long since lost their luster. Seeing you doing so well warmed Albus' old bones a little, and he felt a bit better. As he spread his weak old wings, to take his final flight. This crow's last thoughts were about you. I woke up from a bad dream and went to go sleep with my parents. On the way to their bedroom I had to pass the front door, which had a big window next to it. Two guys were trying to break in, and when they saw me, they knocked on the window to get my attention and motioned for me to unlock the door. My mom said it was a dream, but to this day, the image of those two guys at our front window is as real as any childhood memory I have. This happened over 40 years ago. I had something very similar happen. My bedroom was in the basement and I remember waking up and hearing the grass rustling from footsteps outside my window. I got up to look and saw two men outside. They noticed me and started talking in deep voices. One bent over and knocked on the window asking me to open the door. I remember screaming and running for my parents. My dad immediately went outside and there was no one to be seen. Both of my parents thought I had an overactive imagination and didn't believe anyone was really outside, but they were there. Next week, my neighbor's house was broken into and they stole a bunch of guns. This feels strange to think about to this day because I still believe it to be true, but nobody else in my family does. I had only just started walking and I remember throwing a teddy bear back and forth with my grandmother, who was pretty ill at the time. I could never catch it because I lacked the hand-eye coordination. So she would throw it a little short and I kept throwing short as well because I wasn't very strong. I had just started practicing walking but couldn't fully walk yet. Whenever I would throw the bear way off course, I would get up to try and walk to it but kept stumbling, so she would always go and get it for us. Now, my grandmother died when I was about 1 year and a few months old, so everyone in my family swore this never happened. They said even if I somehow remember something from that early of an age, there is no way it happened because by the time I started to walk, my grandma was too ill to walk herself. Creepy part about all this, I remember my aunt taking a picture of us on our really old film camera while we were playing with that bear, but could never physically find the photograph. I hadn't went back to my home country for a few years. I went back to visit when I was 11 and we were going through old albums and it was there. My aunt swears she never took that picture. Everyone in my family I've asked swears they never took it either. The picture is me and my grandmother sitting across the living room floor with that same teddy bear, both of us looking at the camera with holding the bear out as if she was about to throw it, but my aunt, or whoever took the photo, caught us by surprise, so we both looked at the camera. It wasn't on my mind as we were leaving, so I didn't think to take it back. I wish I did. I was maybe 1 year old in the photo and did not look like I could walk at all, so I'm not surprised my grandma didn't even let me try. The memory is so clear in my head and to have everyone tell me it didn't happen is just off-putting. I have this one memory. I most likely had just turned or was about to turn 2 years old and my family and I was at my grandparents' backyard pool. My mom was in the shallow end of the pool with my older brother and he was clinging to her, too afraid to dip even a toe into the water. My dad was on the patio on the side of the shallow end with my bumper and nana, grandpa, and grandma. They were barbecuing and chatting about one thing or another. I remember thinking my mom looked a little annoyed that my brother was being unreasonably afraid of the water, so my 2-year-old mind decided I would show my brother how it was done. I got out of the pool and ran down to the deep end. I took off my water wings and life jacket, then proclaimed proudly to my family about some random nonsense before jumping in. The next part of my memory takes a very different tone. I just remember how serene and peaceful it was to be essentially drowning. Everything was quiet and calm. To this day I haven't ever experienced anything similar to it. Next thing I know I see my dad and bumper plunge into the pool fully clothed swimming towards me. Don't know who got to me first to pull me out, and I don't remember anything after that. I asked my parents and grandparents about this, and they essentially changed the topic on me, so I have a suspicion it is true, but no confirmation. It just sticks out as extremely vivid and an oddly happier memory from my childhood. Update: So I called up my grandparents to ask about it, and it is true, and there's apparently even a home video about it on VHS somewhere. They said no one really wanted to talk about it because it was extremely traumatic for my mom, who was so close to me but couldn't just drop my brother in the water or pry him off to set him on the side of the pool to go and get me. According to my grandparents, when my mom was pregnant with me, she was at the zoo with my brother, her friends, and their children, and one of the young boys had wandered off and drowned. Kind of glad I called my grandparents first instead of my mom. Goodness. This is one of my most vivid childhood memories, and I just accepted it as true until recently, when I gave it an extra mull over IDK if it was a dream or what. Honestly, there was a worm/caterpillar thing on my tricycle, and I remembered being told they can be poisonous and not to touch them. My parents were telling me to get onto my tricycle, so I was telling them no, there's a caterpillar on there. My dad's asking me where, and him screaming/crying that it's near the handles. My parents are telling me there's nothing there and make me get onto my tricycle despite me screaming. The caterpillar then crawls onto my hand and eats through the fleshy part between my fingers and thumb. On my left hand this obviously didn't happen, but until I really thought about it, I just remember that bit as where the worm ate through each time I looked at my hand. If I was screaming beforehand, I was definitely screaming after. I remember my parents not being able to see it and telling me nothing happened, but eventually I got my dad to put some TCP on it. Okay, so I've had ECT, shock treatment, and it basically saved my life, but it also erased most of my memory from birth until 24 years old, when I had the ECT, because of my medications that I'm on for my schizoaffective disorder. Though, I have incredibly vivid dreams that I often can't differentiate from reality. That said, I remember vividly, from back in my old BBS, bulletin board system, basically a message board, games platform, and Ike, but from before the internet was a big thing, Size-Op days, that I drove out to meet up with a friend that I knew through my BBS, and we both went out to meet up with the Size-Op of a similar BBS in the same town. His girlfriend was a daughter of a politician, so we drove up to her house and hung out there for a few hours. Then I drove back home after dropping off my friend. Her house was massive. There was a giant pool, white marble inside, a gigantic television. I remember she had a Gibson SG in dark red, and I remember this vividly. I kinda fell off the face of the earth socially for a few years before and after the ECT, and I found the other Size-Op on Facebook a few years back. He has a very unique last name, so it wasn't hard once it came back to me, and I asked him if this really happened. He never replied. I've never gotten closure. So, a few years ago I had a dream about my old grandma, as I called her in childhood. She gave me some cryptic message about a baby being born and the child being sick, but to not worry. She handed me this rose quartz elephant, and then I woke up. The whole thing was so surreal, and it made me want to call my mom to see if maybe someone in the family was having a baby. When I got my mom on the phone, told her about the dream, she told me no one she knew was having a baby. We shrugged it off as a weird but super interesting dream, and then we got to reminiscing about old grandma. I told mom about how much I missed old grandma, and I recalled how much I missed sitting on the long white swing under her rose arches as she did some gardening, and talked to me about all the flowers and how to take care of them, and how I'd help her carry in the flowers to put in the vase in the living room upstairs. She'd go into the kitchen and make lunch while I ate those little mint and orange slice candies from a crystal dish on the end table close to huge grandfather clock. My old grandpa would sit in his big brown chair reading the newspaper with my younger brother in his lap reading the funnies. I'd lay down in front of this old radio they had where most people would have a TV and just listen to music until these cool stories came on. When the stories were being told, Grandpa would fold up the paper, turn up the volume and sit my brother on the floor with me, and we'd just listen to whatever was being told that day. Old Grandma would join us with lunch. It was just peaceful, simple, and I'd give anything to have that time with them again. Then my mom was like, Arj, what are you talking about? It rocked my world to hear none of this ever happened. Apparently, by the time me and my brother were 4, my old grandparents had been living in a trailer for years. Old grandma hadn't had a huge rose garden since my mom was a child. And radio shows definitely weren't a thing when I was a kid. I argued with my mom about it for a while. The radio shows had to be real. I just only ever listened to them at old grandparents' house. And I described every floor of that house. Every piece of furniture. The whole garden. My mom was pretty insistent that, yeah, once upon a time they did have a house and garden like that. But it was well before my time. I never saw any of it. The next time I came over to my mom's, we pulled out all these old photographs from our visits with old grandma and pa, and sure enough all of them were from a trailer I absolutely don't remember at all. None of them at that beautiful house or rose garden arches. Those memories are still so vivid. They feel more real than the photos my mom showed me. I know they aren't real now, but I spent 23 years believing in those memories and missing those times. It's still so hard to fathom that none of it ever happened. This happened in Korea. I used to live in a farmland, and they had no street lights. It gets so dark you almost can't see anyone in it. One day I went over to my friend's house. It was about a 10 minimum walk. I remember eating hot steamy rice with pickled beef and eggs. I remember eating about 5 bowls of rice. It got late, past midnight, and I knew I had to go home, so I don't get the whipping with a thin branch. Opened the old school paper door. You can poke a hole in it with your fingers. I remember my heart dropping. If I translate to my language now, I said shit in my mind. It was freaking dark. I started walking, and I swear I can hear footsteps and laughter behind me. Yes, laughter. Someone laughing behind my back. I couldn't even turn around. I still get the goosebumps as I write this. I started running in full speed towards home. I can still remember the laughter and my fake Adidas flip-flop slapping the ground beneath me. It sounded like I was in a cave scared out of my mind. I couldn't ask anyone, since no one was there with me. Sorry if it was boring, but that's my 2 cents. When I was 6 to 7, I had a friend who lived around the block. She had a few brothers and lived in a bigger old and kinda creepy house. We were not allowed in the house when her mother wasn't home, which I found odd as a kid, but makes total sense that you don't let 6-year-old play unattended in your home. My memory is that one day we were in the basement of the house, which was unfinished with concrete floors in the main areas and some off rooms that had dirt floors. We were getting paint brushes, the big house kind, which we used to paint the patio with water. In my memory, I went into one of the off rooms with the dirt floor. In the corner of the room was a small raised area that, if it was outside, would look like a flower bed, and in there was a human skeleton. And not like a Halloween decoration, but like an actual skeleton in the dirt. I'm 40 now and this has always stuck with me. Was there really a body in their basement? If so, whose was it? You have no idea how much I would love to go back down there and at least look in that room. Just to see if the room even exists, if the raised area full of dirt is actually part of the room. The family still lives in the home. I'm still FB friends with them. So much of me wants to just write and be like, so, mind if I search your basement? I was in the 3rd grade. During recess, my friends and I would pretend to be scientists and perform experiments, which just meant collecting weird bugs or mixing dirt and different liquids in a soda bottle. This one recess we must have learned about dinosaurs or archaeologists during class, because we decided we wanted to dig and see if we could find anything. I remember we were digging under this tree, and I left to go to the bathroom or something. I come back and all of these kids were huddled around our excavation site. One of my friends was yelling, "We found something! We found something!" I was elated and broke through the crowd to see a 2 to 3 inch hole and a flat surface. The surface was covered in dirt, but was clearly not more ground. One of my friends pokes it with a stick and it moves. Everyone flips out. I'm excited and probably a little scared. A few of us run to get a recess monitor or an adult to show them. The person of course didn't believe us. Kinned off like a classic 80s movie. We had to really sell that there was something. just to get them to go over to the hole. We finally convinced the monitor to go over. When we get back, I'll never forget what I saw. My other friends had dug more of a hole around the surface to reveal, I shit you not, a crab. A goddamn blue crab. It was moving a lot more now. I should mention we were in Sacramento, California. My school was nowhere near the ocean and barely by any rivers. But here was this honest to god crab buried in dirt under this tree. Just like an 80s movie, when an adult sees the crazy thing for themselves, the recess monitor flips the hell out. They're just a parent volunteer. They probably had no idea what to do. They run to go get the principal or something. In the meantime, my friend discovers that this crab had babies and was offering the babies to the other kids around to raise their own dirt crabs or something. The monitor comes back with a teacher and they pretty much lock down the excavation site. Coincidentally, the recess bell rings too, and we all reluctantly make our way back to class feeling defeated that we just made the most significant scientific discovery in the 20th century and the man took it away. My classmates and I had taken some of the babies. We had them in our desk cupboards in class and weren't paying attention to the teacher. The teacher of course asked us what was distracting us from her lesson. We told her what happened and even showed her the babies. She was a really cool teacher and I thought she would believe us, but she did not. In the end, she made us throw away the babies in the trash can. After school a few of us went back to the tree and the crab was gone. All that was left was the hole it was dug out of. That was it. No explanation. They just took it away and didn't tell anybody. Like the men in black came, cleaned it up, and whipped people's memory of it. They even marked it off, and we weren't allowed back around that tree during recess. I think about it all the time and I even tried googling dirt crab and I guess they are a thing, but not in North America. I still have no idea what happened, but I know what I saw. That was 13 years ago. Maybe my brain has added some details that weren't there. I know had a baby crab in my desk, and I know saw a full-on crab in the dirt. I had to have been real. Was it all a prank? Did my friends plant a crab in the hole while I was gone? Where would they have gotten it? Why pick one with babies? Any help figuring out what happened to me would definitely help my sanity. There is 3. I vividly remember when I smashed my face into a rocking chair at 5. I remember sitting in the ER with a towel on my head, touching my skull and being confused. No one believes I remember what happened due to getting a severe concussion, so sometimes I question if I remember correctly. One night a dark figure stood above me and tried to choke me out. I was scratching like crazy and thought I was having a bad dream. My dad came in when he heard me scream and turned the lights on. My throat was scratched up bad and ended up getting lots of questions at school. I still question to this day what happened, but my memory of that dark face was extremely vivid. No one in my family has ever brought it up, but I clearly remember being attacked/molested on the bus as a kid. It had already happened before, but this memory was so surreal that I still question if it really happened again or if it was just me misremembering. The people's faces are extremely vivid in my mind, but I had zero memory of them outside that incident. When I was between 4 and 6, there was a playroom in our unfinished basement. It was accessible through a door beside the freezer in my dad's workshop. When you opened the door, there was this medium-sized white walled room with a grey carpet, a used fabric sofa, an old cathodic TV and SNES. There was a doorless closet with few board games and hardcover comic books. There was also a tiny restroom with only a toilet. There was 2 small windows in that room, facing our backyard. I would go there to play with one of my big sister and sometimes a neighbor friend or another. I remember the smell of the dust and the way it danced in the afternoon light. My parent didn't want us to go there till late at night. One day I wanted to go play, but the door wasn't there anymore. I searched, but there was no access, and I was angry at my parents. I yelled at them in incomprehension, and they told me there never was such a room in our house. I went to bed super upset that they made a fool out of me. After a few weeks I kind of forgot I guess, but would remember that every 3 to 4 years or so, asking what was up with that room, only to be weirdly looked at and dismissed. I once brought it up as an adult, around 21. I'm now 29, and both my dad and sister try to evade the question, saying there was never such a room in our former home. I tried to talk about it to my psychiatrist because it really feels like a missing piece, but I received no help in deciphering this mystery. I guess I imagined it. I still miss the secure feeling of that place though. It feels good to be able to talk about it. I used to live closer into the city and we lived in a shotgun house where there was an alleyway behind all the houses connecting everything, and you'd have little paths between houses with fences on either side. My dad got home and left the gate open. Our dog usually stayed in the yard, but this time it ran after something down the alley. I started running after it, and it turned down one of the paths between houses that was super overgrown on both sides. Then I see our dog run out. I look down and swear I saw a black panther looking cat walking down towards me. It was one of those split-second things, because my dad came running and grabbed me, so I didn't see anything else to confirm. I was 4 or 5, so that memory is a bit foggy, but I swear there was some sort of panther on the loose. I was uneasy about going outside for a couple of weeks afterwards. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.